Okay, today we are changing the spark plugs on 2015 Subaru WRX. It's going to be the same procedure for a 2015 through a 2020. I'm using the factory original plugs, NGKs, ILK AR8H6. Those are what it came with from the factory. The gap from what I found is supposed to be between 0.020 and 0.022. I've already gap checked these. They're at about a point 0.20 to 21. Just to help you guys out, these are kind of hard to find for some reason. I don't know if they're discontinuing them or what. I couldn't find any at my local parts store in stock. I ended up ordering them online on Rock Auto. So there's a lot of stuff in the way. We're going to remove as few things as possible. You might have to remove more things if you don't have quite as many extensions and such at your disposal as I do. But let's see, we might have to move the airbox, we might have to move this ECU or whatever. Might have to move the battery. But let's just see what I can get at without moving anything. So first I'm going to have to remove the coil packs. It's probably going to be about a little 10mm bolt there. 2 on each side, so let's start with that. Okay, so I started with the easy side. Those are indeed at 10mm. I just used my little 1/4" drive ratchet here. Do yourself a favor and get one of these extendable magnets. I've already dropped my ratchet twice. So those bolts were kind of tight for me. So make sure you got that socket on there nice and straight and not at an angle, that way you don't round the head off of those. So both those are loose now. I'm going to go ahead and back them out by finger. Nice little spot for your magnet. Well, I'm doing it right. I'm already bleeding. That's how you know you're doing it right. Okay, I got them both backed out most of the way. Just put my socket on there and turned it by hand. Kind of have to smash your hands in there to get to it. Like I said, you can move this shit if you want to. No worries, I'm going to show you how to move that stuff anyways. So, make sure we don't drop these. Okay, there they are. So, I'll pop these coil packs out now. Somehow. Okay, that one came out. Just wiggle them and pull back. There we go. So they did come out without having to remove this. Just got to kind of wiggle them and caress them out of there. So that was the easy side. Let's go check out the other side now. So far I have not had to remove anything. Trying to see if I can show you here. See, the bolts are loose. It's hard to see this one down here, wherever it is. But I just kind of gently push this out of the way. Arm fits down in there. Can do the same from here. Okay. And then I was even able to reach around the battery tray like this. So both bolts are loose now. I'm gonna pull them out and see if we can pop these coils off. Alright, so both coils are out. So I'm gonna say you don't have to remove the battery or anything. It would give you a little more room if you need more room, if you got bigger arms than me or whatever, but I didn't have to. So if you do end up removing the battery, disconnect negative first, then positive. You got your little battery holder here, and when you reconnect it, it's going to be a reversal. You're going to reconnect positive first and then the negative. I went ahead and disconnected my negative terminal, as you should do before you unplug anything. And we were going to need to disconnect the battery anyways so that the computer can relearn for the new plugs. Yep. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a 9/16 or a 14mm. Also fits about the same. Alright, so I ran into a mild problem, which I had to remove the airbox for. Pretty simple little plastic clips here just pop out. Unclamp the air box, and it just comes out. They gave me enough room for what I needed. I did unbolt this thinking it would come out. I believe it's just attached down here by some rubber grommets. I think you can slide it out of the bracket, but I'm gonna leave that where it is for now. Anyways, I had to remove the front part of the air box because, well, let me get situated here. Alright, here's the problem. So the spark plug is really far down in there. So I put my socket on it, and the back of the spark plug sticks out. So first of all, this socket completely disappears in the engine. So then you're going to need some sort of an extension to go down in there to attach to the socket, but you can't do that because the spark plug's too long. So you're either going to need a 14mm or 9/16 spark plug socket. They have a little extension on the back. Let's see here, like that. It generally gives it more room for that to occur. Not to mention a lot of them have a rubber gasket on the inside so that it grabs the spark plug, which is great when you're pulling it out, but when you're trying to put it back in, then you can't get your socket back off the spark plug always because of the rubber gasket. And sometimes they leave them on the spark plugs, and then you wonder why you can't get your coil back on. But anyways, so you're going to need a longer socket or a 9/16 spark plug socket. But thankfully I have this great big long sucker here, so that's going to fit on there and give me plenty of room to get my extension and ratchet on there. I had to remove that part of the air box so I could get my magnet in there to pull my socket back off of the spark plug. So anyways, if you have the right length of extensions and sockets and all that, you can get your ratchet in here to where you can remove it. If you don't have a whole bunch of different length sockets and extensions, you might end up like this, to where you will have to remove the air box so that you can get a ratchet on there. So back in here, that's going to be a little more difficult, so I'm going to figure out how to pull this out so we can show that as well, in case you have to do that. Okay, so if you were using a spark plug socket, like I mentioned, it has a rubber gasket in it usually that will pop over the head of the spark plug, so it'll come right out with the socket. If not, just use a magnet to pull it out. So if you're moving this thing out of the way to get more room to get to this. Alright, well, I'm just gonna, you can move this out of the way. Okay, so right there, I'm gonna turn the right way. There's these little rubber grommets here, and this ECU thing is attached to this bracket. So the bracket would slide off of this bracket. I believe it's just attached by these little rubber grommets, but I couldn't get it to budge. So I just took the two little 10mm bolts out of the bottom of this right here, and then you can just, oops, move it up out of the way. And I would not recommend unplugging that, since this is some sort of ECU. You can just kind of put it up there. Now we can see where they go. Okay, so on this one, even with that out of the way, you kind of have no choice to get the right combination of things to fit, because even if you pulled this out, which I think you can do by unbolting it here, not sure, it's only going to give you like, what, half an inch more room. So I can't get that in there right now, so I'm going to have to find the right combination of things to get the right length so I can get my ratchet right out here where I'll be able to ratchet. So on this one, because of this crap being in the way, don't really have a choice. I guess, actually, we could probably use a swivel joint on this. Here, watch, I'll show you. Very good word of advice here. Definitely start with removing the front, because that will let you know if your socket is long enough and all that so that you can remove it. Because if not, you are not going to be able to get one of those magnet things back in here to pull it out if it's too short. Unless you break off the head of one of those extendable magnets, you're going to have to literally break a tool to get it out. So definitely start with the front and make sure you got everything right, because now back here, if I had lost my socket back here, I would have been screwed. I would have to break off the head of a smaller one of these probably to get it down in there. Alright, so here's how you do it with a swivel joint. See, it allows it to pivot like that. But this is going to put a lot more torque on it, and it's not going to give you as much leverage, so it's going to be much harder to turn. But if you have to, you can use a swivel joint so you can have clearance, which is what I'm going to do. They're a little tricky to use at first. You're going to kind of manipulate it to where you can get it in the right position like this to get it to turn. Makes it a lot easier. I'm using a 12-point socket, so I can turn the socket over the spark plug a little bit at a time. Really, for spark plugs, you should be using a 6-point though, so you don't round off the spark plug, but as long as it's not in there overly tight, it'll be fine, which is what I'm using. So like, if this doesn't line up, I can pull the socket off the spark plug, give it a 1-tooth turn in a different direction, slide it back over, and then see if I have the correct orientation to get this thing out, which I do right now. Because you're going to have some play like this before it actually goes tight against the plug, and then you can release it. And then also this thing's going to try to pivot on you, so you're going to have to pull back on with your fingers like this and keep it straight while you push forward to loosen the plug, which I've already done. So it's much easier to just find the right combination of lengths and such, so you can just get a ratchet down in there and do not have to use the swivel joint. But if you cannot come up with that combination of lengths to get it just right, you can use a swivel joint. So here's spark plug number 2. I couldn't get my magnet down in there because of room issues like we discussed earlier, but I was able to just stick my middle finger down into the spark plug hole, get it under the plug, and just drag it out. Alright, so that was the easy side. I'm going to go ahead and pull this battery out of here and see if we can get these ones out. So like I said, I already had the negative off. You can use a socket on that, but on this one you have to use a wrench because this is in the way for a socket and ratchet. Go ahead and take this bracket off. So I don't know why, but this has this little weird plastic nut that goes over top of that, and you have to screw it off. It's a 10mm also. And I started to turn this and it just kind of popped out, so I don't know if that's what will occur with this one, or careful not to make metal contact taking this out, or your battery will arc and get electrocuted. I don't know, like I said, this one popped off when I went to turn it. This one I'm having to use a long 10mm socket to unscrew it. Alright. Ooh, that's hopefully water. I'm assuming. I don't know, I'll check this thing when I'm done, see if it's leaking. Probably just water. There's even a butterfly under there. Yummy. Well, let's get at it. It's actually green, so... Just for reference, this thing was sitting there like that, but I do believe it's supposed to go in there like this. Contrary to what I said earlier, that's going to rub on the battery like that. Anyways, if you have it through there, it's going to rub on the battery. It should go like that, I'm thinking. Alright, so I inspected the battery. Didn't see any cracks or anything. There was only fluid under the bottom of it. So I believe somebody probably went to top off the coolant right here, spilled it, and it collected in the tray under the battery. So there's something what you're going for with the getting the right length. Now this is 3/4 inch drive and all that, or sorry, 1/2 inch drive and all that crap, but you try to find something that has the right length so you come out about right here, a little shorter. So right here you want to be real careful not to crush this. You have one of those swivel joints on there and try to use that with it touching, it's going to try to flex and possibly crush that. So be very careful. Try to get something that just got the right length like that so you can get your ratchet on there and have the clearance that you need. If anything and you have to use a swivel, try to have the swivel joint down in here instead of over top of this so it doesn't pivot and crush it. The other problem you're going to run into is you start to back the plug out, your socket's probably going to, or ratchet is probably going to get hit here. So back it out just enough until you can turn it by hand and get the ratchet off of there before you get it pinched and stuck. This one I couldn't get with my extension on there, so I just put this swivel on it. So that's the problem I was talking about. Now my ratchet's stuck, so I got to flip the switch and go back in some so I can get my ratchet off. The real problem is when you can't get to the switch. Got them all out, so obviously don't drop your new ones. Careful sliding them in. I like to turn it backwards first with pressure against it, and you can feel the threads click when it clears. As soon as it clicks, then go forward. That'll ensure that you don't strip them out. On a side note, this is your intercooler. We got this car, it was already like this. Don't set your tools and shit up there and bend that up. If you do, be very careful. Don't fucking throw them up there. I usually just set mine all up there. Okay, so it's really difficult, if not impossible, to get a torque wrench down in there, but your torque spec for the spark plugs are 12.9 foot-pounds. The coil bolts are 6, I believe. So just snug your plugs down. Same thing with these if you can't get a torque wrench in there. Make sure they slide on straight and over the plug. And I like to push hard and wiggle to make sure I get them seated all the way on the plug, and then we'll just reinstall our bolts. I'm on the other side here where, at least on this one, I didn't have to use a swivel joint to tighten it down. And yeah, man, they go from hand free to stop, and then you got about 12.9 foot-pounds, and if you keep going, it keeps turning, but it doesn't get any tighter, and you run the risk of stripping those threads out. So, you know, most vehicles, I've always torqued them to like 20-30 foot-pounds, and they snug up real good. But on this thing, man, make sure you don't go over that 12-13 foot-pounds, or you're probably going to strip it out. They don't go any tighter. I got it there and went a little further, and nothing changed. It stayed the same. It did not get any tighter. So definitely do not tighten these down as tight as you would on other vehicles, or you're going to strip the threads out. All right, everything's torqued down, both sides. Throw this ECU back down in there and get the airbox back together. Get the battery hooked back up. Okay, so I would torque those down about as tight as you did on the bolts for the coil packs. The airbox here, there should be a tooth that lines up with these notches. Yeah, there it is. So you're going to have to get those lined up in there to get that back in there and put back together properly. Let me grab my air filter. Everything's bolted back down over here. This is what your airbox will look like. Properly put back together, no gaps. Okay. You know, I might leave that off. Have to play with that. Yeah, it's just gonna suck in hot air though. Might make a little noise, but it's gonna suck in hot air. So this, obviously line that up. And then, let's see here. There we go. It actually kind of slides in there. So that's what it looks like. Properly put together. Little plastic pins. Gonna squeeze the skirts together. Get them to go in there. May have to. Just make sure they don't flare out. You can either push that back down or screw it back down. So there's that. battery. Tray goes in like so. Arrow faces towards the front of the car. So I'm not sure, but I think this one was installed incorrectly, because I think they just had it hooked like that, and which is why when I went to turn the nut, it just popped out like that. So I do believe it's supposed to go in this hole down here like that. That's the only way it lines up without being to where it can pop out, because I tried these other holes, and once you get it in there, it puts this at an angle like that, and that's obviously not right. So positive back on first, then negative. And don't forget this stupid little plastic nut here, we got to tighten down also. This is properly installed. Make sure the little tooth there that hangs down is on the side of the battery and not on top of it, smashing it. Alright, so that should be everything. Battery's bolted back down correctly. Tight, tight. Again, it's positive first when reconnecting and then negative. It's the opposite for removing. Negative first, then positive for removing. Make sure everything's snug down. Make sure you didn't miss any spark plugs. Make sure your coil packs are snug down. Make sure your airbox is put together properly. If you did remove it, make sure this is put down properly. Make sure you plug your airbox back in. Anything else you might have unplugged. Okay. Clean up all your tools. Check for sockets and crap. And might not be a bad idea to check down in there. And then should be ready to go.